Welcome back, everybody, to Rams Up, your favorite LA Rams podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube. Got some great video content. Our YouTube handle is at LA Rams Up. You can follow us on Instagram as well. I'm your host, Mark. Let's get to it. Welcome back, Ram fans. This is episode 185 of Rams Up. We've all had over 1 week to evaluate this draft haul of the Rams, 14 players, not to mention a bunch of undrafted free agents. How do we feel about it now? By the way, we're tracking all those signings on our website. So how do we feel about this draft? Well, I had Tom Quartz and Paul Walia back once again. And this episode is my first half of that roundtable, doing a deep dive into this draft. We'll come back Thursday with the second half of that roundtable. The entirety of that is available on video on our YouTube channel, or you can just listen to this one and wait until Thursday for the second half. This episode, we will share our overall thoughts on the draft, what surprised us, what we liked, what we didn't like. Take a look at each of these 14 players. And then Thursday, we'll talk about the undrafted free agents, remaining holes on this roster, and where the Rams go from here. So let's get into that roundtable with Paul and Tom right now. Hey everybody, Mark with Rams Up back here once again with Paul and Tom, and like we did last year, we're going to take a look at the Rams draft. It's been over a week since the draft ended. Our thoughts on the draft have had some time to ferment, perhaps. We'll get into it here in a second. How have you been, Tom? What are you up to?
Oh, doing great. Just enjoying this very different Rams offseason from the ones that we've had in the last sort of 5 years. And so, but it's exciting. I'm really pleased with their direction, and it's just a kind of a breath of fresh air after the terrible year last year. So just enjoying the offseason with the Rams.
Yeah, I think I've actually seen this comment several times. This could be finally an interesting preseason where the games might actually mean something as far as player evaluation, especially. What's going on with you, Paul?
Everything is fantastic. Weather's great out here in the East Coast. I'm looking forward to summer vacation. And also, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting off season for the Rams. So every morning I log in and I have my fingers crossed that there can be some positive news for the Rams. So I'm excited to talk draft.
Yeah, I think we may see some things happening after June 1st for sure. So let's start with your overall thoughts on the draft. I'll go first. I'll try to lay some groundwork here for you guys to bounce off of. I did, I think, 20 mock drafts, and just gives you an idea of, I think the only purpose of mock drafts is you can learn a lot about the players. But if you're really taking yourself seriously, that you think you're going to be thinking along with Les Snead, good luck with that. I think there are two guys, they drafted 14 players, and there were only two players that popped up in any of my mock drafts. That's Kobe Turner and Stetson Bennett. I drafted them a couple of times, not necessarily in those slots, but everybody else, a lot of these guys were not on my radar at all. So I'm just trusting in Les. He's had a couple of mediocre drafts, but I'm hoping he hits on some of these. I think since Brad Holmes left, they may have lost some corporate knowledge on how to evaluate players, perhaps. I don't know, but I'm hoping they turn the corner. And I will say, shout out to Paul. You had said you wanted them to draft 3 edge rushers, and that's exactly what they did. Now, my call on drafting a bunch of cornerbacks did not come to fruition, but that we'll get into that, I'm sure, moving forward here. What about you, Tom? Overall, your initial thoughts on this draft?
Yeah, so I love the draft in general. I like the types of players that they took. I like especially the attitudes of the players, or that based upon what they've talked about in their backgrounds. I think they drafted hungry players, and So that's, I think, a really important trait, increasingly important trait these days. I think that that does lead to, as you know, we'll go dive into a little bit more. It does, when you kind of like a player in particular, sometimes you reach for them or draft them earlier than maybe that they're slotted to go. But I think from a positional value standpoint, they did a great job and really stuck to that early on in the draft, and then started to diversify, which they obviously needed to do into other positions. But overall, like the draft a lot. Have a few complaints with, as usual, with some of their early draft picks, but again, something we'll get into.
Now, Paul, I have a feeling you're going to not totally agree with that, with the direction the Rams went in this draft, based on some text messages we shared.
So I think it was the tale of two drafts. I think if you look at the Rams draft from rounds 5 down, they crushed it. From rounds 5 on, absolutely. The value they extracted from rounds 5, 6, and 7, I thought was exceptional. I think Tom sort of hit on it. I think when you look at what they did from rounds 2 to 4, they played a very safe draft. They played it close to the vest, I think to some degree. They definitely need to see a chiropractor from all the reaching. But other than that, I think it was from what they wanted to accomplish. We walked away with 14 draft picks. They had some very safe picks, a lot of low risk, high reward picks. I think that's what they were basically aiming for. They did. I thought you could definitely see that trend. Older players that had a very high character grades. That was consistent in the early rounds. In their first, I would say, two or three picks, you definitely saw that trend. But yeah, I think round 4 was where the departure sort of happened. We saw that with the Stetson Bennett, and I'm surprised you said about Kobe Turner, because I also had him in a mock, but much lower. So we'll talk about that. But I thought overall it was a safe draft. It was a Rams draft the way they wanted to sort of conduct it. I would have liked to see them take some more chances earlier on in the draft and go for some more dynamic players. There were some very dynamic players on the board when they went with some of their picks in the 3rd round, but we'll definitely talk about that. But overall, I would give them a solid B+.
Yeah, taking off on your comment, Tom, about hungry players, high character players. I have a friend who is a big Clemson fan, and he sent me some comments from the coach there about Davis Allen. And you'd think he was nominating him for sainthood. The guy is probably his favorite player ever, it sounds like. So I think we got a good one in Davis Allen. Let's see. I'll let you go first, Paul. What was your biggest surprise of this draft, player-wise or strategy-wise?
So the biggest surprise, I would say, for this draft for me, I would say was Kobe Turner from Wake Forest. Not that I don't like him. I'll say this because there were a lot of people, my buddies texting me, who is this kid? And looking him up on ESPN and everything. He had really high grades for his run defense. He's not just a gap penetrator, but his highest grades came on run defense, which I thought was really interesting. Great NFL body. You see him. He looks like a football player. I'm just, and I hate saying this because in the draft, it's always, you can't really predict when a player is going to be available. I think they could have got him later in the draft. I want to just read off who was available when they picked Kobe Turner. Mark, don't laugh. Guess who was available? Darnell Washington from Georgia was available.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He sunk a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, he wound up. And guess where he wound up? Look, what does Mark always say? This team is going to take him and turn him any player and turn them into all pros. Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Coach Tomlin, was had him circled right there on the board. Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas was also available. Kelly Ringo, Tom, your boy, was available. Isaiah McGuire, the edge rusher from Missouri, was available. Clark Phillips, the corner from Utah, great playmaker, he was available. So obviously they liked this player. Kobe Turner had tremendously high grades for character, leadership, run defense, blue collar, good ability to penetrate the gaps. But to me, I thought that was a surprise, and I thought Stetson Bennett was a surprise. I thought he would also have been. I had him slated more for like round 5, so I thought that was sort of a surprise too. But it's hard to say when you like your players, it's better to go get them than take a chance.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, Turner, I'm a little confused on that pick because I don't know if they can play him next to Aaron Donald. Maybe they can, but that seems like a pretty lightweight defensive line. I mean, two really good players, perhaps, but still. How about you, Tom? What was the biggest surprise for you?
Well, my initial big surprise was just because of my predisposition for believing not only my own thoughts, but belief that they would take at least 3 corners, and I said even potentially even 4. That they only took 1 cornerback and waited till round till pick 182 to do it. They got a good one in THT Trey Tomlinson, but anyway, so that was my biggest surprise. But just going back to these, since we're on the topic. I think we all agree that the first pick was a solid pick, right? Navilla, and he's going to step in and start, and that's a big need. So great pick there. But the next 2 picks, I'm not, again, I'm probably my least 2 favorite picks of the draft. I would, potentially respectfully disagree, Paul, that they were safe picks. I don't think they're safe picks. I think they have very low, they have high ceilings, but they also have low floors, in my opinion. These are 2 very undersized guys, no real pedigree, very limited film. Both of them were literally not recruited out of high school for different reasons, and so just kind of late bloomers, and the biggest issue there is is their size. I mean, just they're both 6'2". And on the edge, and especially at the defensive line, as you were talking about with Turner. So that was my biggest surprise. I thought we were headed for a train wreck. The Stetson Bennett pick was, questionable, but I understand it's a backup quarterback that they can develop. Some upside there, and then after that, they started crushing it. From Nick Hampton on, they crushed the draft. So in full agreement with you there, Paul.
Kobe Turner wasn't even invited to the combine.
Right.
So that, talk about out of nowhere, right? But
Yeah.
it's like I said, I think that when we talk about the safety scenario, it was more about, I think you could see the role that those 2 players are going to be sort of slotted in, and it's almost like no matter what, they're going to sort of fit into that slot. Whether or not they're going to excel, totally different story. But you see Byron Young. So Byron Young's an older player. He's 25. He had a great story. Was working, I think, in a convenience store. It was a great story, and you were like, they are going to eat this up. This is going to work out great in the draft. He blew up the combine, just absolutely blew up the combine, and that is the recipe in the NFL. They love that when they have these designated edge rushers. Well, once again, and I agree with you. Like, that's what I said. Like, I really think when you're picking in the 3rd round, they had 2 really, really nice slots in round 3 that they could have walked away with some really dynamic players. I think they're going to regret on the players they passed for Kobe Turner 100%. I also think there was such a drop off in round 2 to round 3 in the talent level, and you could see that teams were backing away. And it wasn't just the Rams. There were a lot of teams that had a lot of reach picks in rounds 3 and 4, if you noticed, right? That trend. I thought that Kobe Turner slot would have been perfect to trade back.
Yeah.
And get some more round 4, round 5 picks. To me, I thought for sure they were going to deal out of that 2nd, 3rd round pick and move back a little. I think they definitely could have walked away either with a later 3rd, early 4th, maybe 2 fourths, maybe a 4th to 5th. I don't know. But I thought that was the perfect opportunity to trade back.
Yeah, my biggest surprise was the same as Tom's, just the lack of focus on cornerbacks. And it leads me to believe they either like Robert Rochelle and a couple of those other guys more than we realize. It possibly could mean that they know there are going to be some undrafted rookie cornerbacks that they really like and they can bring in. Combination of those 2 facts. But I'm also concerned about the size of our cornerbacks. We don't have a lot of size back there, and in this division. And I think Tomlinson is going to be a good one, but he just adds to that concern of, We don't have any Tremaine Johnsons on this roster, going up against Debo Samuel and DK Metcalf and some of these guys. But hey, trust in less, I guess, once again. Okay,
You
well,
traumatized me by mentioning Robert Rochelle. I need time to recuperate. I
yeah.
need a
Yeah. I mean, just to put a kind of cap off the conversation about those early draft picks, I kind of had Nick Hampton and Byron Young kind of in that same range, in that mid-teens range in terms of edges, and they got Nick Hampton at 161 and took Byron Young at 77. So I feel like those guys were both that that third, fourth round, that in that range. And I just feel like they could have easily traded back off of both of those picks and just, probably ended up with, 17, 18 guys that were all about the same.
Now, what did we like? Let me go first. It'll be real quick because it goes back to these edge rushers, kind of what you're getting at, Tom, maybe a little bit. And someone wrote on one of the websites, they gave the Rams kudos actually for what they called their carpet bombing approach to the edge rusher problem they have. And maybe that's true. I mean, they drafted 3. Now, I think Deshaun Johnson, I've seen him listed as defensive end and edge. So maybe 3.5 edge rushers. I think the other 3 are definitely edge: Mathis, Young, and Hampton. And that's not a bad approach. I mean, as you move deeper into the draft, 35-40% chance of hitting. And so I'm thinking they're hoping one of these guys really pans out and turns into a really good edge rusher. So I kind of like that approach. Add picks, 14 picks. It just increases your chances of adding impact players. How about you, Tom? Is there
Yeah,
something
no, I agree. No, I love the volume approach, especially in this draft. After the first half of the first round, maybe you could call it up till the end of the mid end of the first round. After that, it just fell off, like Paul mentioned, very, very quickly. And so volume was a great idea. I mean, the Rams got 14 draft picks, one shy of the all-time record of 15 draft picks. So yeah, volume was great. I liked how they spread it around. I mean, just to touch on this, they do have some issues at a couple of their positions, and so I think you were going to get into that with a different question later on. But where do we still have holes? But clearly, in my opinion, cornerback's one of those. I like the approach in general. Don't like a couple of the early picks. Love the later picks, and but there was no way we were going to fill every hole with this draft. No way.
Yeah, so when you do your spring cleaning, or just like Tom said, you have way too many holes that you can fill via the draft. So you got to do your BPA work, and I think they did. And like I said, I think when you look at their tail of 2 drafts, look at the Rams draft from round 5 on, and it's A plus, it's A plus plus. So let's take a look. Let's start with Georgia Dog McClendon. Like our last segment, this was the tackle I said out of Georgia. I love this kid. And he could play anywhere on the line except, guard. He could probably guard, tackle. Fantastic. Davis Allen, his size, and, you got to go back and double check the size, right? Because the college rosters, they always round up by 1.5 inches. He's legit 6'6", right? His combine numbers were actually legit. He was 6'6", 238. Go back and watch his tape. Fantastic at contested catches.
Yeah.
Very smooth. Looks like, a legit pass catching tight end.
So and a great blocker.
Yeah. And he was physical. The only thing was, and obviously that comes with coaching, the technique part of it and everything else. Didn't break as many tackles as I thought for his size, but a lot of potential. Now, let's just stop and think. Let's take Tyler Higbee out of the mix. Bryson Hopkins and this kid. You could have a lot of fun with letting these 2 kids play. Think about that for a second. There's a lot of fun there, a lot of young players, and you got your Hunter Long as insurance. So I like this pick. I really would have liked Darnell Washington, but that's besides the point. I won't let that go. Right? My boy Puka Nacua, to me, very reminiscent of Bobby Trees. I love that's who he reminds me of. He reminds me he has a lot of Robert Woods in him. right? I like that pick. I thought it was a great value pick. Hampton linebacker from Appalachian State. Oh, love this kid. He's like lightning in a bottle. They call him undersized, 6'2", 235, but he can rush the passer. And that Appalachian State defense, they run a 3-4. He plays the weak side dog position, which means he comes on every play. So he's got designated pass rusher written all over him, and sneaky feeling, because the kid's tough, he might even get some looks right next to Ernest Jones, in some of these like blitz schemes. So it might be interesting. So,
because that is a position that they really didn't address as much as I thought as the linebacker spot. But I think they found, I think they found some guys in the some undrafted free agents we'll talk about later. And I'll take off on one of the things you mentioned before we go to Tom here. Another thing I really liked is the versatility of some of these offensive linemen. They got guys that can plug in almost anywhere. Avila, McClendon, Coleman, Shelton, guys that can really move around. AJ Jackson, so they get a lot of flexibility if anything close to what happened last year happens again. I certainly hope
and
not.
A healthy Logan Bruss, right?
Yeah, what if Logan Bruss turns out to be pretty good and Avila is as good as advertised? Suddenly we have a pretty darn good offensive line. What about you, Tom? What did you especially like about this draft?
Yeah, well, just to, I love the. I think we've said it already, but I love the picks from Nick Hampton on. Just I think they just crushed it. I mean, by far the best. I mean, they had the most picks by far, so it's easy to say. But I think virtually every one of those picks, until you get to maybe the last couple of picks, or could have been anybody, but just love those 6-7 picks that we talked about, those 5th and 6th round guys. But one thing that I'm sure talked about a lot, maybe somebody's mentioned it, is the connection between Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So have you guys heard this story?
I do not think so.
Yeah. So Puka Nacua, obviously out of BYU, but he initially went to Washington, right? And he went there because of his relationship with Junior Adams, the wide receiver coach, who was Cooper Kupp's coach at Eastern Washington. So there's a connection there with Cooper Kupp, which is never a bad thing. So whether it's Bobby Trees or Cooper Kupp, we'll see who he ends up looking like. But I love some of these later picks, and we talked about Tomlinson and Zach Evans. I love that was I think a really good late round pick. He's a very strong running back. Kind of had 3rd and 4th round grades. Really just fell for some reason. Even Jason Taylor had 4th and 5th round grades and fell. So that was a great, and just down the line, just great picks late in the game.
And Tomlinson is LT's nephew, by the way, LT21.
Yeah, right.
So.
And that's why he went to TCU. He was going to go to I forgot where he was going to go. He's going to go somewhere else, and LT begged him to go to TCU.
And I got to tell you, I love this kid's competitiveness. When he fell to round 6, I could not believe it. And it was largely because of his size. If you look at his size numbers, he came in a lot smaller than I anticipated. I was like, holy cow, when I looked at his combine numbers. Watch his film. This kid is an ultra competitor. How can you be LT's nephew and not be a competitor? But the kid produces. He has great technique and that TCU run, that was a great run. Think about it. They were in the national championship game, and he was a pivotal part of that defense. He played lights out. So I think he's also a great value pick in round 6. So it just gets better and better when you look at those round 5, round 6.
So, Tom, is there anything that you especially hated about this draft? I think you already gave it away, probably just the top end, or is there a specific player that you didn't like?
No, I liked everything they did. I'm okay with the Stetson Bennett draft. I posted, it's too long of a quote to read, but Mike Giannitti, the head guy at Spot Track, on his podcast, he said, you guys aren't your something. I'll paraphrase. He said, my favorite quarterback pick in the draft, and I know my audience, I know you guys aren't going to like this, but it was Stetson Bennett. Give him 2 years, give him a year or two on the bench to get familiar with that playbook behind Matthew Stafford, and something pretty interesting may come of that. So I love the spot check guys and the over the cap guys. Given my predisposition, but to the cap and the roster building and stuff. But that was his pick. So I kind of agree with that. After that, it was just lights out. But those second and third picks, not big fans of it. But again, they have low floors and high ceilings. If these guys come out, especially Byron Young, lights out and tears it up, then these guys are geniuses. But unfortunately, I think there's a bigger chance, unfortunately, that these guys are not gonna contribute like everybody hopes.
About you, Paul, what was the thing you disliked the most about this draft?
I don't like the bang value that they got out of round 3. I think it was, like I said, I think they went for, all right, when you look at X, Y, and Z. So, I think, so great example would be, we talked about Kobe Turner. I do think he would have been available later, but for whatever reason, they might have more information about teams that may like him, whatever. He did grade out, like I said, very well, but he wasn't invited to the combine. So I find it hard to believe that there were teams fighting over him in the 3rd round, But Byron Young, I could understand, but there were other edge rushers available.
Right.
They took him, and I got to say it, my favorite, we talked about it last segment, Ojulari was available.
Right.
They took him, right? I'm sure Tom agrees. They took him over Ojulari, and they took him over Hall from Auburn, who also graded out very high on leadership, very high on character from that Auburn defense. Wasn't fully developed as a pass rusher, but neither was Young. Young
and ended up with the Seahawks.
Young carried a grade of round 4, round 5 going into the combine. When he blew it up, he went right up to like round 2, right? With the classic combine player that we see in the NFL all the time. But when you talk about edge, and we talked about it last time, was that speed element in the NFL to them translates to success at the edge, and that's what they did. But I still say at round 2 and 3, you want accomplished, established players. I will say this about Avila, that I was surprised he was available at 36. I really was, because he was the number 1 rated interior lineman on everybody's boards. Great player. Everybody knows the talk about no sacks and 515 reps. The TCU run. I think what sold the Rams on him, and I think the only thing I see on his tape that, obviously is his size in a zone scheme. He's going to have to get down to like 325, 320, right? Just for that quickness and everything else to play in that zone scheme. But the one thing I will say, and he does have those T-Rex arms at times, right? He plays with the elbows close to the body instead of locking out. But his interviews, just like last year when I talked about Salier, this kid had great interviews. And one interview in particular stands out for me, and I think that's why the Rams they were like, he's perfect for our locker room. They asked him some questions about the success at TCU and his future, and all he did was talk about his teammates. He spent the entire interview talking about his teammates.
Yeah, I heard a story about the coach at TCU. When he took the job, he wasn't sure what he was getting into. I forget the coach's name. And they walked him out to the practice field, and he wasn't sure how good this team was, what he was getting into. And the offensive line was running through some drills, and Avila was out there, and his eyes were drawn to that offensive line and their workout. And it took him 10 seconds watching them, and he said, "Oh, we could actually be pretty good."
Right.
And it was a lot of that was due to Avila. So that's a pretty interesting story. I wanted to talk about some of these players specifically, and I don't think we need to talk about all of them. We've talked enough about them, I think. But let's see. What about the running back, Zach Evans? He was a surprise to me. hadn't been on my radar at all, but then you read about him. Sound like his career in college got derailed for a number of reasons, but he's a guy that could be a home run. I mean, a high ceiling, high floor, high ceiling, low floor type of guy, definitely, I guess. And I think he's very similar to Cam Akers in a lot of ways. Did you guys? Assuming you all like the late pick, so you must love this pick as well.
Yeah, he was a very highly touted player coming out of high school. Like he was the highest rated player out of Texas, I think, or number 3 overall, the first running back out of Texas. He was the second rated running back, I believe, behind Bijan Robinson in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But just extremely highly touted coming out of high school, and just he got into college, and just it feels like he's kind of like a freelancer. He's not very fundamentally sound. He probably got away with it in high school just out of pure talent, and didn't continue to improve on the fundamentals. So that's the knock on him. But his talent is there for sure. He also had some injury problems, and both in the musculature and in the skeletal, as well as in with some concussion stuff. So there's a lot of reasons that he fell. I mean, it kind of all added up, but we got a really high ceiling guy there. I'll tell you that. That was a great pick.
And you have any opinion on Zach Evans, Paul?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking more about the Rams. When you look at what they spent a high pick on Kyron Williams, right? We got Cam Akers, and Mark and I always talk about this. We need a back that's going to move the chain. So I was thinking they were going to go for that kind of back, right? We had talked about that before. They went in a different direction, right? And Zach Evans was a TCU transfer, right? It's like like you had mentioned. He is not a big back, but he's a fast back. But when you watch his film, he shows a lot of toughness, breaks tackles, runs downhill when he needs to. Had some injury concerns. He might contribute as a kick returner early on until he works his way into the mix. So that might be. He definitely has that home run hitting capability. The one knock on him, they did say he's a big fumbler. He has his ratio of attempts to fumbles is exceptionally high. So I'm the other way, fumbles to attempts is exceptionally high. So that's just something to keep in mind. But like I said, he's got a lot of talent. Definitely has the tools to succeed. Needs to put on a little bit of weight. He looks to me a lot of the criticisms about him were the same that they had for Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he big enough? Can he carry the load? That type of thing. And also, he wasn't able to be the main guy on 2 college teams. So that always is a question mark in a lot of scouts' minds. However, in round 6, can you complain about getting a home run hitter like this?
Right.
That's the way you have to look at it.
Talking about a move the chains type of guy, we may have found one, the undrafted rookie Tyon Evans,
From Louisville.
Louisville. Now, I don't know if he'll make the team, but he's that type of guy, I think. Well, we'll talk about the undrafted rookies a little bit later. How much do you guys know about, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Ochuan Mathis? He was another guy that I was really completely unaware of him, to be honest.
So the Nebraska linebacker, he is once again sort of playing it close to the vest. He is a great length, 6'5", 250, long arms, does really well at locking out the edge. Reminds you a little bit of, when you look at that 3-4 Staley defense, right? Very important, right? Strong side linebacker has to spill everything back to the middle. So I think the attractiveness there is more about how he plays the run. He's got good potential for the pass rush. Numbers weren't off the charts, but is a good developmental player. However, can play the run well, has the physical attributes to play the run well on the strong side. The mindset might be, Hoyt, is he going to be on the strong side or the backside? If you put him on the backside, you can maximize his pass rush ability because of his size if you play him on the strong side. But can he handle playing the run as well as the pass down after down without losing that that pass rush sizzle. So might be a rotational piece, but that's the way I look at him. That's what I see.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a one of the few, I believe, reaches in that late in those later rounds. They must have really liked this guy. Most boards kind of didn't have him being drafted, just kind of a priority free agent, I think. So yeah, I mean, he's I think like Paul said, he's really just physically sound, but he's just really underdeveloped in his application on the edge, and so we'll see. He just has great raw talent and just a lot of upside. So they must have just liked that. There's obviously a theme here in the Rams draft. It's high ceiling guys that are high character, older, ready to go, if you will, from a age perspective, but high ceilings because of some gap, either undersized or underdeveloped, and they were willing to reach on a lot of those guys. And so if they hit, it's going to be great, and if they don't, it's going to be a disaster.
I wanted to talk about this punter, and we had talked about special teams, drafting special teams before the draft, and I think we all kind of agreed that, at least I think we agreed that they might draft one special teamer, a kicker, or a punter, and they would have the pick of the litter, so to speak, of free agent long snappers and such. And that's kind of what happened. And what I really like is they found a punter in the draft that can just boom it. And then they signed an undrafted rookie who is extremely accurate, but not a big leg. And then they got the best long snapper out there, I think. But the combination of the kicker punter, the punter they drafted, the kicker was the free agent. I really liked how they solved that problem. I'm feeling a lot better about their special teams. It's still going to be we'll still all be a little nervous come game time, 3 rookies. But I think drafting a punter with a big leg was a smart move in the 6th round, was it, I believe? Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah.
I know Tom, I know you weren't you were probably the least of the 3 of us, the least thrilled with the prospect of drafting a special teamer.
Again, at the end of the draft, why not, right? They need all these positions. Probably not a long snapper. I would have thought they would have gone with a kicker, but they got a good kicker as a UDFA and Dunn. And with Evans, they did. I think they did a good job there too. And they really liked the guy. He's out of a smaller school. He wasn't one of the top guys on the board at the time, but they just love his booming leg and feel like they can work with him on directionality and release time and other things that he sort of needs to work on. But so yeah, it's fine. With 14 picks, taking one special teamer that you really like, they just really picked him because they didn't want somebody else to get him as a UDFA. That's really what they did. So.
And now I know that Wingate University exists, and I actually know sort of kind of where it's at too.
That's right.
How about you, Paul? Were you okay with the Ethan Evans pick?
Well, first thing, as you can tell by the gray in my beard, I'm very old. So we live by the old rule: you never draft kickers. You never draft kickers. You get them as UDFAs or you sign them as low-cost vets. But having said that, so Ethan Evans definitely was considered the best punter in the draft. High marks, his hang time, they love it. He can boom it, no question about it. Did have some experience on kickoffs too. Very important in the NFL now, having punters that can do it. His only criticism that said he has to work on was the directional kicking, which is huge for the Rams. That's their thing with their punters. And secondly is how quickly he can get the kicks off. Right, Wingate very different in terms of the competition level. So that's like the hardest transition really for punters is how quickly can they get the punt off and still get that degree of hang time as well as distance.
So
yeah.
So that said, you're not a big fan of the Jake Moody pick either, then.
I mean, other than Ray Guy, who can we talk about where really kickers that are getting drafted pan out? But listen, to each team, each to their own. Everybody has their own strategy. The Rams, as you both alluded to last time, like you said, might be, prepping for next year. So they're building the roster from the bottom up, really. So worst case scenario, they have a strong bottom half of the roster.
Yeah,
That's the way you really have.
yeah. The 49ers situation, it seems like they've got a pretty darn solid roster, except for maybe kicker, and we. What about quarterback? Maybe they're the team that should have drafted Stetson Bennett, but
Yeah. For me, kickers, particularly when you talk about special teams, listen, it's called the third phase for a reason. Teams that pay attention to special teams, they do well. Teams that overlook special teams and really give it lip service, they pay the price during the season. And when you talk about place kickers, it's a hard reality and it's hard to digest. Place kickers translate directly into wins. They're the ones that are on the field with 1 second left on the clock. Whether they make it or not translates directly into a win. So this Matt Gay scenario and how they're going to resolve it is going to probably translate to at least 2 wins or losses in the season.
Right. So who else have we not talked about? What about Jason Taylor? Thoughts on Jason Taylor, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned him before. I think he's he was a really good, a really good late pick as a safety. I mean, sort of had him kind of in that 4th, 5th round range. So I think that was one of their great pick at 234, I think, or something like that. And so yeah, just super excited. I think he has a chance to. That's one of the areas that they. Obviously their whole entire secondary is in need of players, but he'll and plus he's going to be a great special teams player. Like he fits that mold that they like. So he'll definitely be a solid special teams player, probably a standout special teams player for us. Having lost so many of those guys that we lost in the, with the purge, the big purge. And so, yeah, anyway, looking forward to seeing him. I think he's a bigger guy than some of our other guys at that position, say Russ Yeast and things like that. So I think he has a chance to do well there.
So Jason Taylor, I think he slots really nicely behind Fuller. He's got the size to come down into the box. Has some good coverage ability. 6 interceptions last year, surprising, right? 6 INTs, so he's productive, and we know the theme that Les Need and Coach McVay have been talking about since last year. They want that production on defense. So I think he slots really nicely behind Fuller because that, the critique on him has to improve his tackling, but coming out of college, that's like 90% of all college D-backs. They have to improve their tackling. Play recognition was another questionable attribute, but got high marks, hard worker, great work ethic, works well with the coaches, team leader, positive influence in the locker room. So when you take a look at it, and also I agree with Tom. I thought when I look at him, I think he's going to contribute right away on special teams. So I think it was a solid pick for that late in the draft.
Yeah, great pick.
I think we've talked about every player except Deshaun Johnson, Mr. Irrelevant. Any thoughts on him? He was another guy that was not on my radar, and a guy that gets drafted as Mr. Irrelevant. That probably happens with a lot of mock drafts. He probably wasn't showing up. Any thoughts on him, Paul? You seem to be the guy that does a little bit of a deep dive on some of these players. What do you know about Deshaun Johnson? I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Well, I did not even have him as a draftable player. I had him as a UDFA. However, and you notice all the linemen that they took fall around that same range, right? 6'2", 290, 6'2", 285, with that Aaron Donald effect, so to speak. Right? They want those penetrators, those short, low to the ground guys. So he's described as a penetrator. He had good production, and if you look at his TFL and sack numbers, good penetration capability, quick off the ball. The ability to defend the run is the question. But if you look at what he was drafted for, he might be that, time to give Aaron Donald a breather type scenario. So, we'll see how it plays itself out. But once again, late in the draft to get a player like that, once again, he's described no red flags when it comes to character or anything like that. Fits in perfectly for a 7th round pick.
Any thoughts on him, Tom, or any other player that you wanted to add anything about?
Yeah, I mean, just Yeah, Johnson again. He's yet another undersized defensive lineman. So I think they think everybody is Darren Donald or even Kalijah Kinsey. So I'm not sure, but but I mean, it's just like so. But maybe they think it's the future. I don't know. I mean, clearly, I was going to mention this earlier, but if the Rams the way they're going so undersized, and if that maybe that's their next innovation, and they were doing the trade high picks for players, and then the rest of the league started doing it. They weren't the first ones to do it, but they sort of did it en masse. And then we saw what happened last year, and then they couldn't trade high picks for superstar talent anymore because everybody else was doing it. So it caught up with them. Maybe this is the next innovation. I mean, that's one thing that struck me, and is undersized defensive linemen. If these guys develop and with some skills, and obviously who better to teach them than Aaron Donald, then it could be something tremendous. But he falls into the same mold without the physical freakiness of say Kobe Turner.
Tom and I are going to wear Ashawn Robinson jerseys for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we want our 330-pounder back.
We need the run stopper. We need that one run stopper on the whole team, right?
Yeah. So
and maybe Bobby Brown's that guy. I don't know. Maybe there's someone they have in mind for that. There were some really big D tackles available too throughout the draft, and I mocked a few of them because I thought the same thing. Just throw in a big beast in the middle there.
But situational, to think of of value, right? The draft value, that when you look at where Greg Gaines went and where Ashawn went in free agency, you can see that those guys are not highly valued unless they're freaky athletic. So they didn't draft any of those guys just because they can be bought on the free agent market really cheap, and so. That's another reason that if a guy is small and better and athletic and can play on the defensive line and in the interior defensive line, then that guy's going to be worth a lot of money. So, that's why I think they didn't draft a big beefy guy.
That's the first half of our roundtable. We'll be back Thursday with the rest of it. Undrafted free agents, some final thoughts on the draft, remaining holes on this roster, and where the Rams go from here. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. Visit our website at ramsup.com. And don't forget about our YouTube channel. Our handle is at laramsup.com. Till next time, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.
Music courtesy of the YouTube audio library. Tracks featuring Bar Crawl by Track Tribe, Buckeye Bonzai by Vans in Japan, and Crimson Fly by Huma.